Hey, hey. All right, I see a few of you are here. I just sent a message out to everyone else. I don't know if you're getting feedback on your side, but let me know what's going on by sending me comments. Let's see, a little live chat on the side, perhaps. Obviously, this is all new. Okay. I see 7 of you watching. I just threw a chat out there too. Nick, thanks, man. Yeah, once you guys find the live chat, just give me a little hello so I know you're here. Nate's in. Jenna's in. Yeah, and spread the word to the others. I don't know what happened to my last one. I had to restart my Wirecast program, and I think it ended my event. But Maddie's in, Amy's in, Annie's in, Andrew's in, Alicia, geez, the A-team. Hannah, what's up? Catherine, Sarah, Anna, we got a crew. Sweet. All right. The numbers are moving up now, so why don't we just get started? Go ahead, send a question you've got through the chat session here. I'll try and write them down and catch them. I figure we can just do Q&A, and then if there are no questions, we can just start paging through chapters 7 and 8. And yeah, see if you have any questions before tomorrow. All right, so Catherine's got the first one. What are the Warhawks? Well, so we're looking in chapter 8 here, and the Warhawks are this new set of people in America who basically want to see us go to war again in 1812 with Great Britain. They're fed up with with the British harassment of our sailors and harassing our ships when they get into the European ports and causing us to pay taxes when we get there. So these motivated young Republicans are really, really pushing to go to war. And in fact, they do such a good job of kind of coming together that the next election they were able to gather enough support that the Congress was greatly switched from a more Federalist to Republican Party, most of them being war hawks. That when Madison asked for that declaration of war, he got it, much to the fact that many war hawks, or people that were pro-war against Great Britain for the second time, were elected into Congress. So that's that. Awesome. If you guys would too, what are the war hawks? And if you even know what page number that's on, go ahead and throw the page number down if you know it, and that can help us and myself, but you guys too, to turn to that page and check out the information yourself. So Mr. Hot Cosby here. Okay, what was the Quasi-War? So the Quasi-War was basically, again, the war on the seas, and it was you can kind of picture it as two big brothers fighting, and it was between us and France, and we were fed up again with their harassment of our soldiers, or excuse me, our sailors on the seas, and we tried to negotiate some sort of peace with this, but to no avail. So we ended up actually kind of having some skirmishes on the sea, France taking several of our sailors and ships. And so we never declared war, but there were these small conflicts occurring. And the effects of this, of course, were, as the European wars continued forward, we had to start choosing between Great Britain and France, and our nation was very divided between these two nations. And so that was kind of the start of, or the spark, you could say, of us heading into war in the War of 1812. So that's the quick and the dirty there. It's the French people begin pissed off Americans and vice versa. French ships seizing American vessels. Good, Katie, thank you. All right, what did the Naturalization Act do? And I wrote this one down. So let me find this one. There we go. The Naturalization Act, 1790, basically said that only whites can become citizens. And there was another one tied with that, and that was the Alien Act. And the Alien Act said that an immigrant could only become naturalized or become a citizen after 23 years instead of 5 years. So both of these acts obviously were very limiting and discriminatory, and set the stage for a lot more legislation to come that perhaps isn't full of the liberties and freedoms that we thought our new country was going to be built upon with the Constitution. Okay, there's nothing in the Constitution for French. Okay, good, good, good. Keep sending those questions. Otherwise, we're going to sit here like awkward people, and I guess it's just me talking, so. The different ordinances, okay. Yeah, so Jen is throwing out there the different ordinances. So we're going way back. Chapter 7 here. 1784 Land Ordinance basically gave the right for these new territories to have self-government and to organize themselves as such. 1785 was an ordinance that regulated land sales out there, and of course you wanted to have some sort of organization when you're trying to settle brand new territory. And so that's kind of where we talked about how they blocked off sections 36 by 36 miles, and then you had quarter parcels. Then there was also the fight of, is this the government that's going to issue these land grants, or are they going to sell it to private companies of which they can handle it and resell it for a profit as well? So that's 1784 and 85. And then 1787 was the last ordinance, and that basically stated that, hey, we are going to establish 3 to 5 states to the west of the Appalachians. And so it kind of stated mostly to the Native Americans in that area, but to the rest of America that, hey, we are looking to move westward, and we aren't afraid to move past the Appalachians, which, some Federalists didn't necessarily want to expand any further. They were more concerned about our own area here and getting economic movement rolling. They were afraid of expanding too far, stretching our resources too thin, or not being able to manage it, and seeing us expanding as something that could cause us to go bankrupt. So those are the 3 ordinances there. And then the Northwest Ordinance too, I'll throw that one in, basically stated that, hey, these are native lands. We will pay you for them, although we know how that probably went, and that there's no slavery out there as well. So okay, we've got, what do we need to know about the Articles of Confederation? Okay, that's a big question, but for the Articles, obviously, you need to know it was established for the first 6 years. It was actually something that we wanted. We got exactly what we wanted. We wanted to have our more local governments and more individual freedoms at a local level. The Anti-Federalists, as you know, they're obviously in opposition to the Federalists, but anti-feds were all about, hey, why would we be ruled by someone who's 500 to 1,000 miles away and they never see us and they don't know what goes on here? And so the Articles were built around this idea of more control locally. You should know that many good things happened out of the Articles. We were able to take care of some border disputes. We established or went through the Treaty of Paris, 1783, so ending our war with Great Britain, which was advantageous to us. And I can't think of the last one, but obviously then the failures were the federal government being unable to tax the states without states' permission, the inability for them to really do anything without states' permission, because they needed 9 out of 13 states to say yes to a new law, and all 13 to make any changes to the actual laws or rules of the Articles. So if anything got done, it was really slow and monotonous, and rarely it ever did. So it kind of came to the end, of course, with Shays' Rebellion, and seeing how, whoa, one state's issue could kind of tear apart our whole nation even further and divide us. And so that's a big turning point there, is Shays' Rebellion, and finally our nation starting to see, okay, we do need something more if we are going to stay together as a country. So that's the quick answer there. Grace is asking again, who are the Midnight Judges? And Grace, I got a revised answer here for you. I kind of led you wrong as I double-checked everything. So the Midnight Judges, and this is back in Chapter 8 now, it was when Adams was in his presidency, and he was trying to push through 4 Justices of the Peace, not the Supreme Court judges, as I was telling you, Grace, but just simple Justice of the Peace down in D.C., and they tried to push him through right at the end, and Madison actually stepped in as another executive and said, no, we're not going to give it to them, it's too late in the game. And then the big piece of all this, that's kind of the backstory, but the big piece is the Supreme Court stepped in and established something called judicial review. And that's what you really need to know, is the judicial review, which basically means that the Supreme Court is able to overturn or look at legislation by Congress and say that nope, it's a go, or no, it's not. So yes, it's constitutional, or no, it's not. And so that was a gigantic power that Justice Marshall, who you should know him too, okay, you'll find him in the textbook, Justice Marshall instituted for our country and our government. So that's the quick one there. Elaine is asking, why did the Federalist Party end? You'll find this right on the last page of Chapter 8. Basically, they kind of screwed up, had some really bad timing. They came in and said, I'm going to double check it here since it's on the same page. But they basically came in and said, boom, boom, boom. Oh, yeah. They came in and asked that they amend the 3/5 compromise, which is part of the Constitution, which you recall maybe the 3/5 compromise means that all slaves in the South count as 3/5 of a person in elections. And of course, the South wanted this to try and increase their power in Congress. And so the Federalists threw this out there the day before Andrew Jackson's victory down in New Orleans reached the rest of the country. And so the Federalists were just pummeled with bad PR, talking about how dare you try and tear apart our country as we just had this great victory against Great Britain and, you know, the war has ended. That, and there was one other piece to it. Oh, yeah. It was this whole idea like that they're elitism. Federalists, remember, are those who believe that the uneducated or the normal person shouldn't be able to rule in Congress because they're unable to. And so this is kind of Hamilton's viewpoint of, hey, let the educated, the wealthy, and those of, you know, high intelligence run the country. So that whole idea really was going by the wayside, and populism, basically the idea that, hey, everyone can do this. So the idea of populism was really starting to catch on. And so with those two together, it basically, the Federalist Party basically died in a night or two, which is pretty crazy. So that's kind of what happened there. Next question is Kentucky and Virginia resolutions. I wrote that one down as well. Where are you now? Well, I can't seem to find it, but I can speak to most of it. So the Kentucky and Virginia resolutions basically asked or talked, it was Jefferson and someone else threw out the ideas that we should, hang on, something's going funky here. Sorry about that. Okay, sorry, I fixed it on my end. Okay, sorry, we're all good. Okay, Virginia, Kentucky resolutions basically said they were fighting this whole Alien Act and the Sedition Act. So I'll say what the Sedition Act is first, and you should know this. The Sedition Act is basically a law that's saying, hey, any press, any information that's thrown out there that is against the government, we're going to shut you down. And so it was a major fight against this freedom of speech, obviously the First Amendment. And so this act was seen by many as, whoa, 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 you're breaking our First Amendment. And so that was fought greatly amongst the common people. Then it was the Alien Act as well, as I already talked about, where it took you 14 years to become your citizen. And if you weren't, or you didn't go through the naturalization pieces, you could be deported. And so the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions were drafted by a couple anti-feds, Jefferson being one, saying that, hey, in our states, that's not going to be the case. Unfortunately, most of the other states didn't catch on with that, and so those resolutions kind of fizzled away. But the point of it was that there was a large group in our country who were trying to fight for these individual freedoms and acceptance of immigrants from other countries. Okay. Do we have to know a lot about women's rights? No, not a whole bunch, unfortunately, you could say. But, you know, Wollstonecraft, know her, Mary, she was actually out in Great Britain, and she wrote a piece on women's rights soon after Thomas Paine wrote his Rights of Men in Great Britain. But basically, there is this idea that some do believe that women can be as intelligent, if not more so, if given the chance to prove themselves. There was even a newspaper that was published for a short time about women's rights, but it just didn't seem like our country was quite ready. Remember, they are considered citizens. They're counted towards the population. It's just there's not much beyond that. So, okay, next one. Oh, you guys are flying here. Okay. What did the Federalists believe? Okay, Federalists very quickly believed in the elite running the country, industry running our country, economics and business running our country, not expanding our country westward, being in close allies with superpowers in other places, especially Great Britain, having a strong central government. Those are kind of the big ones. You can find more too. Okay. Why did Jefferson believe that Hamilton's financial plan would destroy both freedom and the republic? Ooh, great question. He felt, again, that it was far too monarchical, so too much power given to too few people, and he felt as if there was no one that was going to check these activities if Hamilton's financial plans were put into effect. He felt like the elite and the wealthy would only become more wealthy, leaving everyone else behind, especially when Jefferson felt like the expansion of our country and agriculture would be our future, believing that farmers and crops and then obviously free trade with that would bring great success for our country. Katie, Treaty of Greenville. Whoa, you are going super detailed. You won't need to worry about that one. If it does show up, don't worry about it. I'll take care of you. But you can look that one up. What was the significance of Marbury versus Madison? Okay, so that goes back to the Midnight Judges. And Marbury was one of the 4 justices of the peace that was going to be given his job. And Madison was the guy who said, no, we're not going to grant this. In the end, this is where Marshall said, yes, Marbury, you deserve your post, but no, the judicial branch of the Supreme Court has no power written in the Constitution to say that what Madison did was wrong. So Madison won this one, but the Supreme Court also said that Marbury, you are in the right as well. So it was kind of foggy, but then that's when Marshall wrote the whole judiciary review, saying that, hey, we have that ability to do that, and they can begin to state whether a law or a decision is unconstitutional in Congress. Now, Madison was in the executive branch at this time, so that's a little different. That's why they said, no, we can't force Madison to change his decision. Okay. Nixon. Okay. How did the Embargo Act of 1807 benefit Americans? I don't think it did. If you recall the embargo, and I'm going to find it here. Yep. So there were a couple embargoes. The second one, instituted by Jefferson, was pretty harsh. And I don't know if that's the one you're speaking to, Kieran. I have to check up the dates again. But the embargo that we instituted on France and Great Britain during their scuffle really hurt us. And why did we decide not to trade with them? An embargo, remember, is we're not going to trade with other people. So both France and Great Britain have been harassing our soldiers or sailors, and in the case of Great Britain especially, they've been impressing our soldiers, meaning our sailors, excuse me, which means they've been stealing our sailors and putting them on their own ships or taking our ships and having them fight under the British flag against France. This is a big no-no to us, of course. And so we kind of decided, well, we're going to show them that they need us. And Jefferson instituted an embargo and basically cut off all trade with both of France and Great Britain, of which both of them really didn't even know or care because they were such in heated battle with each other. And so for several years, it only hurt our pocketbooks greatly. And in the first year, 80%, I believe, of exports dropped in port cities. It was not a good thing. So eventually that was ended, and then we continued to negotiate with both sides. We tried a couple different plans, one being right at Jefferson's end of his presidency saying, hey, whoever stops impressing our soldiers, we'll trade with you. And then Madison instituted the same type of plan when he came in, and France jumped on that one. And we basically stopped all contact with Great Britain until that war ended. And of course, Great Britain beat France, of which then they came and fought us. And so then that was War of 1812. What the frick is the XYZ affair? So kind of on the same realm we were just talking, but this goes back another presidency. So you can see here, France and Great Britain matter to us big time. We are still heavily influenced by both. As you read the chapter, I don't know if you caught this or not, but the Federalists are more in favor of Great Britain, while the Anti-Feds are more in favor of France. Nothing more obvious than when the Constitution was being written, Thomas Jefferson is in France, and so he's an anti-Fed. So the XYZ affair was during John Adams' presidency, so our second president, and France was again messing with some of our sailors, but we were also concerned because there was a lot of sentiment in our country in favor of this extreme self-government that France was starting to do through their own revolution, to the point of, beheading their king and a whole bunch of other people. And so some in our country, many, felt like, hey, this is the direction we should take. So Adams, anytime he was sending out messages or sending messages on the sea to his people, he wouldn't use the French officials' names anymore. He would just label them with XYZ. And so when France heard of some of these messages being passed, they were greatly offended because they thought that we were forever going to be allies. And so France took this as a little hit to the gut. And our respect and our relationship got pretty rocky after that. And the impact on domestic policies. Okay, I kind of spoke to the domestic policies a little bit, but we could tell that Adams, being a Federalist himself, started to kind of tighten the whole how much freedom do individuals get a little bit. And they were concerned about really keeping our country together because we've only been under the Constitution here for about 8 to 10 years. All right. Okay, I'm not going to give you guys like the main points you should know for the test. That's going through your guided reading questions, okay? Looking at the headings in the book, you can see hopefully what's most important. Let's see what else. I did give a little test helper to my classes. You'll find that in the Unit 8 resources folder, so you'll find kind of a question by question riddles, I guess you could call them. Government for difference in the public. Yep. Ooh. All right. Try and keep the chat, people, about questions and answers, not about a whole bunch of other stuff. Okay. Otherwise, it takes too long for me to get through everything. So like right now I'm going through a whole bunch of stuff. That's none of its questions. Still trying to find a question. Okay. Difference between Hamilton and Jefferson. Quick recap. Hamilton Federalist, Jefferson anti-Fed. Hamilton National Bank wants to assume all debt from the Revolutionary War to free up the states, as well as then making new debt by having major investors in economic activity invest in the country, of course, which would then only encourage these investors to make sure that our country is successful, which was genius by him. And so very much the business side of things there. Jefferson, obviously agrarian, wants to see our country expand, create more farms, free trade with other countries. Jefferson is small government, small central government, more power to the states, so more of the articles type. Hamilton, strong central government, weaker state government, more the federalism type of idea, so state powers and federal powers. That's kind of the quick recap there. How did the expansion of the public sphere offer new opportunities to women? Great question. It wasn't just women, but many, but the sphere created more opportunities for women in the idea of more word is getting out now. Pamphlets, magazines, newspapers are becoming the norm all over the place, which means women can get their hands on these items a lot easier. And so this is when women started catching on. You read a story in here about one gal who basically learned everything that her brother was learning as he was heading to Harvard, but she did all the same learning as well. So it's just the idea that, yeah, the ability for print to be in everyone's hands, slaves included. If you could read, you could now have a voice of some sort. Okay. Catherine, yes, live stream will be available after it's streamed. It'll upload after some time. I don't know how long it'll take. Okay, Revolution of 1800. Yep, that's when Jefferson was elected. Nice job, Nick. Good one on that one. Treaty of Ghent. Did anyone talk about Treaty of Ghent? No? Okay. Treaty of Ghent was basically the end of the War of 1812, and Ghent is an actual place. And so in 1812, well, at the end of the War of 1812, when both Britain and us were like, neither one of us are getting anywhere, let's just stop. That's where they went and signed the treaty. The treaty basically said, hey, we're not going to get mad at you anymore for impressing our sailors or taxing us or harassing our ships or even still having posts out in forts with British soldiers that were supposed to be gone 15 to 20 years ago. And of course, they said, we won't get mad at you for declaring war against us, trying to invade Canada, of which that was a failure. And so it was just kind of a truce. Both sides, we were definitely bankrupt. Great Britain said, okay, we're fine too. We're still kind of licking our wounds from France. So that's a good question there. Okay, after Jefferson became president, didn't he basically become a hypocrite? And after a while, he changed his views more towards Federalists. Great catch there, Britta. Yeah, if you read his section about his presidency, he actually kind of repealed a lot of the legislature that Adams and Washington put into place. So you should check those out too. But in terms of how he was a hypocrite, yeah, he used his federal power quite extensively. I mean, he expanded executive power greatly, especially with the Louisiana Purchase. But of course he wanted to jump on that one because we know he wanted to expand our country, and why wouldn't you do it for 15 million? What else? There were a couple other pieces of legislation that he passed, which, yeah, truly made him look hypocritical. He was pretty open about the Louisiana Purchase, saying, yeah, I know this isn't exactly the way I usually do things, but in this case, I had to do it. Okay, yep. Just questions, please, on the post, or answers to questions. Nothing else. Okay, question I caught here. How did the Constitution limit democracy? It's kind of subjective, but I can answer it as, if you just mean the Constitution, not the Bill of Rights, then you could get to the debate of our federal government having too much power and too much concentrated power, not leaving enough or anything to the states or the people. You could also look at it in the way we elected our presidents for the first 6 or 7 elections, where we elected our electors and they voted for the president, so there really wasn't even a popular vote in about half of the states. Some of the states did have a popular vote, but half didn't. So there's still a lot of limiting of how much faith they had in the common white man. Now remember, some blacks were able to vote if they were free, but only males, of course. So yeah, kind of an interesting situation in terms of voting and power distribution right off the bat with our Constitution. Okay, Barbary Wars. Good question, Grace. Barbary Wars, basically we're talking Tripoli and Tunisia, so we're in the Mediterranean Sea, but it's northern Africa. And the Muslim nation there was doing a lot of kind of kidnapping and then, hey, give us a ransom, we'll give you your ships and sailors back. And we actually did that for a while until we finally said, no way, Jose, of which we went and defeated them pretty soundly. Only to have their activities like that continue. And then a few years later, we came back and did it again, and from that time on, really didn't have an issue. So the Barbary Wars, though, the impact there is kind of, that was our first war, I guess, after the Constitution being instituted. So it was like the first conflict that we had as a country that we had against another country. And also because these nations were Muslim, it kind of created this mindset in our heads that they're exotic and not good and we hate them. And that mindset, unfortunately, carried for decades and decades forward after that. Okay, more good things coming in. Okay, Kieran, you want to know the 5 steps of Hamilton's program? One was first to establish creditworthiness. And so he thought if we take on all the debt, that'll actually prove us creditworthy. And remember, creditworthiness is the idea of how much people have faith in you that you'll pay back your debts. And then 2 was actually to create a new debt. And that's what I talked about earlier with providing bonds to the economic wealthy people. And of course, if you get them invested in your country or your government, they definitely want to see your country be successful. So that was step 2. 3 was the national bank. So the idea there was to have all economic activity be in one spot, and then the bank a private entity, not a government entity. So that's what Hamilton loved about that, was this is a private business. So then they could turn a profit for the stockholders. And so that was step 3. Step 4 was a tax on whiskey to create revenue for the national government, which, if you're familiar with the Whiskey Rebellion, that obviously angered a lot of farmers who felt they were unfairly being taxed due to the idea that, hey, why are we the only ones being taxed on whiskey when all we're doing is turning our wheat into something that's more easily transported? And what about the middleman and the transportation and those selling our whiskey on the market? They're not getting taxed, only the farmers. And so that's what the Whiskey Rebellion was all about, which, sorry I'm going off topic here, Kieran, which is the only time that our chief executive, our president, George Washington, hopped on a horse with 13,000 soldiers, went out to this small rebellion and said, knock it off, because they did not want another Shays Rebellion occurring. So that is the only time our president has actually been on the front lines with his army. Eisenhower was pretty darn close when he was in office, but by no means was he on the front lines. And then number 5 was a tariff on foreign goods. Obviously, you put a tariff on foreign goods, that hopefully encourages people to buy American-made products. And he also tried to propose a national army, but that got shot down pretty quick because they felt that was far too much power to be given to the federal government. Okay, some of you are answering questions. That's good. Okay, will the Gabriel Rebellion be important to know for the test? Yeah, I mean, it's good. It's good. The Gabriel Rebellion, again, remember, was a slave revolt in our nation, not successful. Due to some weather issues when they were going to rebel and do their whole big action of, taking over some towns, word was spread, and they were kind of shut down. But again, why talk about that in the textbook? What's the importance? Well, it shows that, hey, there's a community of free blacks and educated blacks that are really starting to push for freedom. And you can just see all these small little rebellions are starting to pop up all over the place. And at some point, our Congress and our government's going to have to address this white elephant in the room, slavery, which they just continue to avoid and avoid and avoid. Oh, okay, hang on. Okay. Again, just looking for questions. All right, who's John Jay? What's his relevance? Major part of the creation of the Constitution, major diplomat, pretty heavy hitter in our Congress, wrote some good legislation. Nothing too crazy. If you go to your textbook in your iPad and type in his name, you could probably get a couple lines on him, a couple good pieces of info, but nothing super, super big. do the differences in wealth due to slavery in the North and South matter? Maybe not so much in wealth, but obviously in their political viewpoints, yes. And again, where they see the future of our country going, yes. That's a big difference. So that's a lot there. I'm actually made it to the end here, folks. So if you got more questions, throw them at me. Again, questions and or answers to the questions only, please. Okay, Joe, you must have been a little late to the game. Yeah, the Warhawks, kind of discussed it earlier, a group of mostly Southern and Western backcountry young men who kind of were riding the coattails of their fathers and grandfathers and their glory in the Revolution. And so they were already ready and pumped to go to war with Great Britain again. And the way they kind of did this was through a lot of legislation and pushing information out. They even, during the next campaign process, really pushed their agenda, and they actually changed much of the shape of Congress to be many Warhawk Republicans, so kind of that anti-Fed Jefferson side. And eventually, yeah, it was a big part in why we went to war with Great Britain again. Good answer to that one, Nick. Thank you. Good, Britta, with the Warhawks. Thank you. All right. Still got about 10 minutes, so if you got any more, send them my way. Otherwise, I can start paging through, I guess. You guys haven't talked a lot about Chapter 7, so I'm going to go back there. Okay, so the articles you guys should be pretty solid on. I think I saw a question about what about Congress in the West? Well, basically, it was talking a lot about our relationships with Native Americans, which we haven't talked about a lot tonight at all. No one's asked that about Native Americans. Obviously, Native Americans are not considered citizens. They're not included in population voting, but they do have this interesting power being able to make treaties with us. But as you know, most of those were just ways for us to gain more land from them. We talked about the land ordinances. So that was good. We know Shays Rebellion. Okay, nationalists. Okay, maybe we've talked about more than I thought. Okay. Oh, the Constitution itself. New Jersey plan, Virginia plan. Do we feel good on that? For my classes, you guys have that graphic organizer. Look at that. You should be good. Separation of powers. Okay, quickly, separation of powers. Basically, we created this system of federalism where we have state power and federal power. Powers split that way. And then again, in the federal government, we split powers with judicial, executive, and legislative branches, each of them having checks on themselves. Yeah, so that's good there. My classes, or all of you guys, you should look up New Jersey plan and Virginia plan. That's easy. Know all the compromises of the Constitution. So you got the 3/5 compromise. You've got the big state, little state discussion we were just talking about with representation, and that's how we kind of created our Senate and our House of Representatives, House of Reps being based on your population, and the Senate, every state getting 2 senators. So that was huge. And then again, we kind of talked about it too. Federalists were all about the Constitution. The anti-Feds wanted that Bill of Rights, so they compromised again and brought both of them together. So looking at other questions here. Okay, I think I saw one that said what was the Somerset case? Okay, Somerset case. It was just an interesting piece of philosophy. It was real though, where Somerset was the lawyer, I believe, or was he the client? But anyway, this slave was brought to Great Britain, and then the slave sued for his freedom because he was in a free nation. And so his lawyer did an amazing thing and said, you can't take away a person's free air when you're on free land, sort of thing. And so that idea reverberated back to the Americas, where we kind of made a law called extraterritoriality, which basically said, and it's the fugitive slave law. So if a slave leaves Virginia for Massachusetts, even though he crosses state lines, he's still considered a slave. So that was part of our Constitution as well for a while. Naturalization Act, we talked about that one already. 1790, basically, the Naturalization Act said, hey, only whites can become citizens. So, what Native American tribes we're going to have to know for the test? Well, in specifics, not maybe a whole bunch, but you should know what they've been doing. So you could look at the Cherokees and their ideas of thinking, maybe we should assimilate with the white colonists or the white citizens. Then you have others where this is new revival of Native American unification. So you got Tecumseh and a couple other leaders who all around their tribes were saying, hey, we need to fight back. We need to have a revival. We need to change the way we're living. And to the point, really, that in the War of 1812, a lot of these Western tribes were fighting on the side of Great Britain. And that kind of hurt them after we came to a truce, and we did not really forgive them, of course, for them fighting against us, which is interesting because in the War of 1812, we also had Native American tribes fighting on our side. So again, the natives are stuck in this middle game. They're the middle, stuck in between people, and they're just kind of getting killed for it. Okay, looking for a couple others real quick. Go over the Bill of Rights and why it was created. Yeah, Bill of Rights, that's the anti-Fed compromise. They were appalled greatly that by the fact that the Constitution left out individual freedoms and liberties. They thought it was the craziest thing ever. I think Patrick Henry was that guy who stood up and said, this is nuts. So they got it passed by saying, we will sign the Constitution if you pass our Bill of Rights. I would say, actually number 9, no one ever thinks about Amendment number 9, but that's a pretty darn powerful amendment. So take a look at that one. But that's basically saying, hey, if there are whatever rights are not stated in the Constitution to the people, if it's not stated in the Constitution, it belongs to the people. So that's a huge law. And then number 10, excuse me here. Number 10 said, hey, if a law is not stated in the Constitution that belongs to the federal government, that power automatically lays with the states. So that is also a big one. So good one there. Tecumseh, Elena, yep, just know him as one of the leaders of the Native American tribe that kind of began to believe that we should fight back again against the states. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Okay. All right, well, it's looking like we're kind of hitting a cold spot here. 31 of you still watching. Thanks for coming. Here's what I got for you tomorrow before you sign off here. Tomorrow morning, Mr. Meyer is going to hold a session at 7 a.m. He will be ready to ask or answer any of your questions too. So I would double up on this. He might see things differently than me, so definitely ask him some questions. Take a look at your guided reading questions tonight. Review your notes, of course. Your notes are always your best friend. And then maybe if you have highlights as well, just page through the chapters again, just to refresh your eyes. Look at the images. Look at any of the statistics. Anything that your brain can connect to would be huge. Thanks for all of you who are doing a nice job on the chat there, bringing questions, bringing answers. That's awesome. Also, thank you for ignoring those who were a little immature. And I'll see you all. Well, sorry, my classes, I'm not going to be there tomorrow. My kiddo's sick, so you're going to take the test with a sub. So please be kind to him or her. And I will see you guys on Tuesday. Thanks so much for being here, and see you soon.